Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another zombie review. And this time I'm doing Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Which I got this DVD just because I really like that cover. I remember seeing this in the video store a lot when I was a kid. Now, the first Return of the Living Dead is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of my favorite zombie movies, just one of my favorite movies. Especially one of my favorite horror comedies. The sequel, though, I can't say much for the sequel. I mean, it came out in 1988, a year after Evil Dead 2. Now, Evil Dead 2 is even further up on my list of favorites. I mean, that's easily in my top 5. Both Evil Dead films are in my top 5 favorite movies. Reason why I bring that up is because this pretty much went the Evil Dead 2 route. It's not really a sequel. It feels more like a remake of the first one. Definitely more emphasis on the comedy. I mean, just when you thought it was safe to be dead. I swear to God, Jaws 2, that tagline has been spoofed more times. Also, I'm not sure if this has the original soundtrack, because I know VHS to DVD, they changed the sound, the score. So, I don't know if I've ever seen it with the original music. I don't mind some of the music, like when the zombies are coming out of the ground. Obviously, it doesn't even come close to touching the score from the last film. Now, the funny thing about this is the first Return of the Evil... I almost said Return of the Evil Dead. Return of the Living Dead was a very R-rated film. You know, you have Linnea Quigley's naked sexy dance. You have a lot of language. Pretty straightforward gore. They were leaning more towards like a family-friendly film with this. So, like, there's no nudity. The gore is very tongue-in-cheek. It's not gory like red blood, like things happening to humans. It's done in a very silly way. Couple F-bombs. It's still rated R, though, so I don't know what they were trying to accomplish. This is still a cult film. Like, it does have a cult following. But it's been pretty... ridiculed over the years. I mean, this holds a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, at least for critics' rating. The audience rating is 43, which I think is fair. I mean, actually, there's a few 0% movies, like Toolbox Murders. I love Toolbox Murders. I don't love this. Now, I don't hate this movie. I don't even think it's bad. It's just nowhere near as good as the first one. And again, bringing back Evil Dead 2, it's essentially the same movie. You know, it doesn't even mention the last film. It just builds off the mythology the first. Because, like, in the last movie, you have James Karen telling Tom Jones about how Night of the Living Dead was based on a true story. And, you know, typical army fuck-up, as he says it. It opens up with the narration of that, like, back in 1968, a film, Night of the Living Dead, was released. It was about the military's test chemical 2,4,5 Trioxin. Only this takes place in... Actually, I think this also takes place in Kentucky. Well, it says during the zombie outbreak in Louisville, which is where the last one took place. So I guess there's more barrels. Which, if this is an actual sequel, I mean, you would never know. You wouldn't. So, the military truck with the containers in the back. The military guy that's driving, he's smoking a joint. Hits a pothole. Couple barrels fall up. And now it's funny. The first film, James Cameron hit it and it broke. This falls off a truck, it bounces on all these rocks, still doesn't break. We get our lead, our lead is Michael Kenworthy, who's a young kid. He was actually Shawnee Smith's brother in the Blob remake, which I like. He's the lead in this. Pretty much the same kind of kid. He's smart, sci-fi kid. He's got kind of a mouth on him. There are these two bullies. One is Billy. Then there's the other kid. You know, they're going to put into this initiation for their club. So they go to the cemetery. Of course, the lead kid, his name's Jesse, runs away. They end up in this tube, like this culvert tube, which somehow the container landed in that. Watching the film, I don't know how that's physically possible, but it does. Jesse runs away. The two bullies kind of fuck with it. It opens, sprays them, goes up into the air, and it's essentially the same movie. In fact, Karen and Thom Matthews are back in this as different characters. Karen plays Ed, Thom Matthews plays Joey. There are a couple of grave robbers. They're in this mausoleum. Thom Matthews has a girlfriend. And, you know, while they're in the mausoleum, the chemicals, it's like cemetery fog, gets in the mausoleum. They don't get it, like, straight in the face like they do in the last film. And basically, that's all it is. It's just... And the zombies, the effects aren't terrible. Like, they look like decent zombies, but it's just done for comedy. And, you know, it's... Jesse has an older sister. The cable guy, who's, you know, the handsome potential love interest. He's a cable guy who shows up at their house late. Eventually, the two grave robbers, Karen and Thom Matthews and his girlfriend, they end up meeting with Jesse, his sister, the cable guy. They go a few houses down to this old doctor who's basically just doing like George Burns, because he has a car, 59 Cadillac. So there's our group of people. And I will say, unlike the first Return, which takes place in, you know, either cemetery, a medical, you know, supply warehouse, or the mortuary, this one's kind of all over the place. A couple different houses, a hospital, the road. And it's all very childish, silly humor. In fact, I don't know what Karen and Thom Matthews are grave robbing. I mean, they take jewelry, but he takes a head and puts it in a bag. So then, like, when they're all in Jesse's house, the bag starts to move. And I guess it's the equivalent of the half zombie in the first film. Which, when the cable guy stabs it in the head with the screwdriver, like, the zombie doesn't have lips. So, like, get that screwdriver out of my head. Very silly. And then somehow that head is also in the last shot of the movie. Don't know how. And yeah, it's just a lot of really silly stuff. I mean, you do get some decent effects. Like, Thom Matthews' girlfriend punches one zombie, and it's all this, like, Nickelodeon green slime, and the head's all imploded. There's one zombie that gets blown in half with a shotgun. I mean, that all looks cool. I mean, it's all discolored, like very black or brown or green. And there's even a part, like, Jesse's sister is into, like, TV aerobics. So, like, when the house fills up with zombies, the TV gets turned on somehow and all the zombies are watching the yoga tape. I guess the equivalent of dispatch, send more paramedics. They're all in an ambulance, and a zombie gets on at the hospital, gets on the radio, is like, come to the hospital. So the doctor there with the George Burns type guy thinks it's bullshit, and he's like, let me ask you, who's the president of the United States? And the zombie's like, Harry Truman. Watching this, it's basically like an R-rated episode of Goosebumps. That's what I get from it. The effects, like when James Karen and Thom Matthews, when it hits them that something's wrong, they're in the mausoleum. They have a coffin that's open, and it's almost a skeleton, but it has like normal human eyes. Gets hit in the head with a crowbar, and it's just, it feels. It really does feel like a long episode of Goosebumps. Very silly. I've seen this a few times. Every time I've seen it, the 2 or 3 times was during my drinking years. So I just attributed me not remembering it to that. I literally just got done watching it, and again, it's forgettable. That's its main flaw. It's not like an 80s horror comedy, 80s gory horror comedy like its predecessor, like Evil Dead 2, like Reanimator. All 3 of which are some of my favorite movies of all time. Or hell, even early 90s like Dead Alive, which is another one of my all-time favorite movies. This is the only sequel I own because 3, isn't that just about like a zombie chick that the military tries to use? I don't know. I haven't seen the 3rd one. I've seen bits of 4 and 5 because the Sci-Fi Channel used to play them, and that's all they are. It's Return of the Living Dead in name only. They're just very shitty Sci-Fi Channel quality zombie flicks. This is the closest we have to a sequel. Yeah, that is kind of sad. I do think they went a little too kiddie with it. Maybe it's because the first one was a big cult hit. But still, they couldn't have tried very hard because it's still rated R. But I do kind of like the Evil Dead 2 kind of sequel remake feel of this. I actually do like that. In fact, there's even a part when they're all together in the car, and Thom Matthews is even like, I feel something's not right. I feel like we've done this before. Like, you, me, us, we're all here. So yeah, they're kind of poking fun at themselves. But Thom Matthews and James Karen, even though they kind of take a back seat, they're still fun as hell to watch. James Karen is even more pathetic than he was in the first one. Oh, God, oh. But those 2 work great together. Those 2 were my favorite thing about the first one. And of course, he has a girlfriend in this, which is funny. There's a zombie that is dressed like Michael Jackson from Thriller. Thom Matthews' girlfriend is dressed just like Tiffany. She looks just like Tiffany. Even the dialogue's almost the same. Instead of Tina, it's Brenda. Like, Brenda, let me eat your brains. They smell so good. But then she lets him. He's like, come on, baby, it's me. And she's like, okay, take me, baby, and eats her. There's really no blood, like red human blood. Yeah, it's not that great of a movie. I wouldn't even call it like a Batman and Robin type sequel. It's not Survival of the Dead. It's definitely more fun than Survival of the Dead. The ending's more happy. There's no nuke. I could have sworn that they got nuked at the end of this one too, but they didn't. They somehow get to this thing where Jesse can turn on the main power, and since it rained, there's puddles everywhere, and he just fries all of them. I guess that's the main zombie, the bully. In the beginning he has slicked back hair, and then as the film goes on, his hair gets more and more messed up. They do try and redo the Tar Man, but the Tar Man is nowhere near as cool looking. The effects are different. It's very thick latex. Like, it almost looks like Halloween masks. That's what the zombies look like. And the Tar Man is nowhere near as cool. Like, he even tries to copy the Tar Man's like movements. It's kind of a pathetic ripoff. But I mean, it's watchable, and if it wasn't for James Karen and Thom Matthews and sort of treating it like an Evil Dead 2 sequel, remake, almost same thing, then yeah, this would be a pretty bad, even more forgettable movie. But I still loved James Karen, Thom Matthews. Obviously not as much as when they were in the first one. But yeah, I don't hate this movie. It's just, or even really think it's terrible. I just don't think it's that good of a sequel. Especially since, you know, for me, the first one's way up here. And this, I mean, it's like a forgettable, kind of shitty zombie movie. But, you know, when the first one is so good. This is the only one I care to see. This is the only one that I think is worth it's at least worth watching. There were some parts where I'm just shaking my head like, oh god, that's just too silly. But I don't remember them. But yeah, I've gone on longer than this movie deserves. It's not terrible. The only thing that makes it watchable, I mean, would be, to finish what I'm saying, Thom Matthews, James Karen, the fact it's like an Evil Dead 2 kind of quasi-sequel remake. But yeah. Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Nowhere near as good as the first one. It's not terrible, but I would say it's the only noteworthy sequel. So for Room 237, that is Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Thank you for watching.